Hello again, this is JG Vibes of Alchemy of the Modern Renaissance and the Voluntary Hippie Podcast. In this video, I'm going to share my optimistic perspective on the turbulent times that our species is currently going through. What I'm about to say is nothing new to my audience, but these are very important points that are worth some rehashing. If you pay attention to what goes on in the world at all, then I'm sure that you have been filled with hopelessness and anger at one point or another. This is a normal reaction to the kind of insanity that we are seeing take place today, but at the same time, we need to have the ability to look past the daily news and focus on the big picture. Many people are getting discouraged because it is becoming obvious that this current way of life is unsustainable, and those same people are under the impression that maintaining this way of life is the only hope for our planet, when in reality, the complete opposite is true. The collapse of this insane system is actually our only hope. So I say bring it on. I know it may sound like a crazy statement to make, so let me explain a little bit. What's going on right now is definitely intimidating. Between the drug war escalation, the expansion of the NATO colonization of the Middle East and Africa, and the chain of recent authoritarian legislation that we have seen pass through Congress, including the NDAA, the anti-protest laws, the strip search laws, and many other. I'll be the first to admit that everything that is going on right now is very ominous, and there are some serious issues that must be faced head-on by our species. However, I also see a lot of things in these strange times that we are living that are good, and I see a great opportunity here for the human race. First off, the frantic behavior that's being displayed by the government and the mainstream media in the past year or two is showing just how desperate the powers that shouldn't be are getting. Their whole scam is dependent upon their control over the human consciousness, and that control is beginning to unravel. This is the same kind of situation that happens when someone is in a debate and they start yelling and screaming and resorting to ad hominem attacks when somebody makes an argument superior to theirs and they lost the argument on the intellectual front. When someone is exposed as illegitimate or guilty of some sort of transgression, it's fairly typical to see them act out in verbal or even physical aggression. It is not unusual for guilty parties to act outraged about accusations against them that are true and then paint the victim as the villain to get the attention off of them. This kind of a scenario is exactly what we have been seeing play out in the macrocosm of geopolitics, and more people are becoming aware of their enslavement. The establishment is lashing out with all of their might to overcompensate for their own obsolescence and illegitimacy, which is now being revealed to the public on a daily basis. What we are going through right now may seem crazy and unusual, but really it's nothing new. It happens to every single civilization. This free fall to collapse that takes place during the end. This is the inevitable process that government goes through. So this has been a long time coming. In the past decade, hundreds of societies have collapsed and begun to rebuild, and in today's technological civilization, those collapses are far less dangerous, violent, and miserable than we saw in the times of ancient Rome. And that's kind of what people are thinking that our collapse is going to be like, and it's just not possible with the kind of technology that we have today. And I mean, if people are within different societies are willing to work together and cooperatively face this adversity that has disrupted their path, then we can find a way out of this mess towards a free society. There is no doubt that we are in the midst of a storm that has been raging for centuries, and the insanity of that storm is definitely growing by the minute. For this, we should have every reason to make any and all preparations that we deem to be necessary, but we should not be consumed by fear to the point where we are considering violence or nihilism. The reason why there is so much fear surrounding the obvious downfall of our civilization is because people have grown detached from their communities and have lost their ability to be self-sufficient. Therefore, they are reliant on the state for their every need, so they think that when the state goes away, that they won't be able to fill their needs in any other way. With that being the case, the first step towards overcoming that fear and preparing for the oncoming storm is to get familiar with your community and find ways that you can be more self-sufficient. Growing food, getting to know your neighbors, establishing community study groups, and learning about off-the-grid solutions are just a few ways to strengthen your family and your community as living standards continue to deteriorate. People these days seem to be talking about the end of America like we are somehow going to forget about what we have built in past generations and just return to pre-industrial living conditions simply because the government and their fake currency has failed and may not be around for much longer. I would personally say that the end of America is kind of a good thing, actually is a very good thing, because this is a dictatorship, and how could the end of a dictatorship ever be a bad thing? The establishment wants us paralyzed with fear, so they can prevent us from making any moves that might rock the boat. But we can't row the boat to safety without rocking it. So we must find the courage within ourselves to make waves instead of sitting around waiting for the boat to row itself or waiting for the deranged hijacker of the boat, our government, to set sail in its own direction. It is absolutely true that we are dealing with one of the worst dictatorships that has ever walked the earth, and I am in no way trying to downplay the seriousness of that issue or the threat that they pose to us. However, we must not be scared into thinking that there aren't any options for us or that we're fighting a losing battle, because those kinds of defeatist attitudes actually prevent us from making any real progress. So while we should not fear our oppressors and their increasingly maniacal activity, we should be aware of the reality of our situation, and we should still be planning for the future. I mean, these people talk about doomsday coming, and I would argue that we are already in doomsday, and we have been for most of recorded history. It is true that something is coming, something different. The signs are all around us that we are in a transitionary period. In the deteriorating economy and the culture that we have been raised to worship, there are signs everywhere. So if it's not doomsday that is coming, then what is all this madness leading up to? I would say that it is quite possible that the downfall of this civilization could be the greatest thing that ever happened to humanity. This could be the final fall of Babylon, the ancient dictatorship which every power-seeking nutjob has tried to replicate over the past untold amount of centuries. Think about it. Millions of people feel helpless because they see the madness that is created by our social institutions, and they cannot conceive of a way that this system can be overthrown. Meanwhile, this system is overthrowing itself in plain sight, right in front of us. Many of us wish that the government could be overthrown, yet we fear its inevitable collapse when we should be embracing it. There is no escaping it anyway. It is already coming, and in many ways it is already even here, as we saw with the fallout from the 2008 collapse, which is still taking place today. If it wasn't for the Fed propping up the economy with more debt and fake money, our moment of truth would have long since passed, and it probably would have made things a lot easier for us to deal with in the long run. But that being the case, their deception is going to run up eventually. They can only play this game for so long before hyperinflation takes effect and topples their already shaky house of cards. This is an incredible opportunity for the human race, what we're seeing right now. If we are adequately prepared in terms of getting our physical needs met, as well as developing the mental and philosophical maturity that is required for the establishment of a free society. While the world seems to be descending into insanity all around us, it is important for us as individuals to assess the kinds of goods and services that may be needed after an economic collapse and devise peaceful, sustainable methods by which we can provide these values to our families and communities. There is no doubt that this whole collapse has been staged by international interests who seek to implement their own plans for the human race when that time comes, as they have all along every time something happens. However, they will only be able to create their authoritarian slave farm if the slaves ask for it and assist in creating it. Slaves, which is pretty much every single one of us, will only ask for this deeper enslavement if we are unaware of its consequences rather, and see no possible alternatives. This is why it is so important for us to develop solutions to meet our needs and the needs of our neighbors without depending on the initiation of the use of force as government does. That is the method of doing business which has destroyed civilizations time and time again since Babylon. Likewise, it is equally important for us to advance a proper understanding of philosophy and of our current situation so the population is socially mature enough to be their own masters and accept the new and unusual nonviolent solutions that will be presented by creative freedom seekers like yourself.